For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Shannon de Rehove. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me for Suttner's View, a weekly commentary on South Africa's political scene. Welcome, Professor.
Thanks.
Now, at the Grahamstown National Arts Festival, new Arts and Culture Minister Nathi Mthethwa referred to the arts making a contribution towards building a new cohesive society. But he also warned artists not to cause social discontent with works guided by derogatory intentions. What do you understand him to mean?
You know, first of all, I'd say it's very important to be cautious in making pronouncements about art, which, especially when they take the form of prescriptions. You're not dealing with the police force where you can issue an instruction and it just goes down the ranks. It's very important that the person who runs arts and culture should understand the complexity, the nuances, the way in which artists grapple with meanings, and people who observe artworks have multiple understandings, and artworks resonate in different ways. Now, this notion of art building cohesive society is itself something that's up for debate, because what the minister understands by a cohesive society may not be the same as what you and I understand and what many artists understand. And when he suggests they should not be socially divisive, the reporter of this press conference, because he didn't say this in his official statement, these were more or less off-the-cuff remarks, and his official statement was not problematic. But Mary Corrigal, who reports on this, reads that as a reference to the spear painting. And I think it's quite interesting to look again at the controversy around the spear painting. It was attacked as being un-African and disrespectful of President Zuma and his and African culture, because Zuma was depicted in a painting which was actually originally a painting of Lenin, and the painting depicted him with his genitals exposed. And this is said to be, it was called Hail to the Thief. And the title indicates that the painting was referring to associations with Zuma, the associations with alleged corruption and proven irregularity in regard to handling of funds, which we've seen reinforced since that painting. Now, if one suggests that the exposure of a man's genitals in a work of art is un-African, one is actually running against multiple cultural works in Africa. There are lots of sculptures, of wooden sculptures, which depict the genitals of men. And in fact, you can go to cultural markets in South Africa. If you go to Rosebank, you will see some of these. So that is nonsense. But I think we can ask ourselves, and we need to look at the work and ask ourselves, in depicting the president in this way, did it feed into the pain that African men felt under colonialism and apartheid when they claimed to be emasculated? We have to address that as part of a discussion, not a diktat. I can't make the diktat, nor can the minister. We also need to ask ourselves whether by depicting genitals exposed in this way, one feeds into a racist conception of African males as being hypersexed. But we also need to recognize that the context of Zuma's life at that time was itself one which evinced hypersexual activity. In the public domain, it was known that he was associated with an alleged rape, and also that he had engaged in a number of sexual liaisons, sometimes leading to marriage, sometimes not. So I think it's very important when someone suggests that they should not use derogatory forms of expression in the artistic works, that the minister recognizes that culture is up for debate and is up for contestation, and he can't treat this as something where he can issue a command.
In the press report, it is suggested, as you said, a further link to the spear painting, when Mthethwa suggested that only an African child understands how to address their elders. What do you make of that?
You see, presumably he is referring to treatments of Ubuntu, as Ubuntu derives from a proverb that you can find in all languages of South Africa, although people know the Nguni version best, it seems, but it can be found in a number of parts of Africa as well. And the way it's introduced here is quite interesting, is that he's introducing it in relation to hierarchies, that just as Zuma as an elder was not respected in his view in this painting, so we must look to African children to see how you treat someone with respect. Now, the way in which Ubuntu is interpreted is not uncontested. For example, not everyone would stress hierarchy and deference to parents, though some people do. And in fact, in the reaction to the spear painting, I went and looked again at these. Some people say that in African culture, age, being respected because you are old, does not depend on your conduct. It is an automatic factor. Now, I would question whether everyone holds that view, that no matter how disgraceful a person's behavior may be, just because they are old, one need respect them. I think that many people would argue that you forfeit respect if you behave in a particular way. Now, he made other comments which I think bear on this way of trying to essentialize, that is to give a singular meaning to African culture as opposed to it being contested. He referred to the need when we look at these things to draw not on colonial knowledge but on the indigenous. Now that's again to suggest that what is indigenous is something given and obvious, and that is unproblematic to refer to the indigenous. Now, there is a writer called Pauline Huntonji from Benin, very, very impressive philosopher, and he's written about what he calls ethno-philosophy, this idea that Africans have a sort of consensus about what life is about philosophy and things like that. And he criticizes, he doesn't like using the notion of indigenous because the word indigenous is used in contrast to the world of the West, the world of the European. And he argues that when you resort to indigenous in this context, you tend to exotify culture. And I think we have to be aware that if we treat the culture of the African cultures of the African people as singular, as having one meaning, and resort to this word indigenous without problematizing it, there is the danger that we will be treated as something exotic. And that is not the emancipatory conception of culture that I think we want to build. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking about South Africa's political scene.